Okay, hello YouTube. Today we're going to be going over the mainline Yugoslav variation. So after e4, c5, we're going to be going into the dragon, and then white's going to choose to play the Yugoslav variation with the queen d2, and then bishop to c4. We're going to have bishop to d7, and white's going to do something a little bit different in this line. What white's going to do is white's going to basically just decide that he wants to keep his king in the middle of the board. Black is going to continue to play his queen a5 line. So after say bishop b3, we're going to play queen a5. And then white's going to keep his king in the middle. He's going to play h4, rook fc8, and then he's going to play g4, knight e5, and he's basically just going to keep his king right in the middle of the board, and he's going to play h5, and he's just going to play for mate without ever castling. So how do we deal with this decision? What do we do here? How do we not get mated? So if you like content like this and you want to see more of it, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button and click on that notification icon. So how do we handle this? This is definitely an option. This is something that white can try, especially in the queen a5 lines. This is something that white can try to do. He can say, I'm not going to castle queenside at all. I don't need this rook on a1 to play for checkmate. This rook doesn't really get used when you play for checkmate, so I'm just going to play like hg, bishop h6, and play for mate. What are you going to do to stop me? And it's a serious question, and it's a question that you have to answer. And this is one of the reasons that when you play the dragon with the black pieces, you have to be very prepared with black. And of course, you always have to be prepared to sacrifice material with the black pieces. You have to know your theory, you have to memorize your lines, and you have to know exactly what you're doing, because you're going to get into a situation like this where if you don't play very, very precisely, you will get mated. So the move that I'm going to recommend here is going to look extremely goofy, but it is the absolute right move in the position, and you should absolutely play this move when you have this position. Otherwise, I don't know how you play this position with black. I just don't know. So the move you should play is rook c4. And I know that move just looks so strange. You put your rook on a square where it can get captured by a bishop. What's really interesting about this move is this type of sacrifice does not work if the king had already castled queenside, and this is the important theme. The thing is, if the king was already castled queenside and you had played this move rook c4, there is no obligation for white to take this rook. And actually in this position, there isn't any real obligation for white to take this rook. But if he's castled queenside, there is really no obligation to take the rook because there's no threat. You can put your rook on the c4 square, but you're not threatening anything. But with the king in the middle of the board, there is actually a serious threat in this position. Black is threatening rook d4, followed by knight f3, and that would fork the king and queen. So this move, rook c4, is effectively taking advantage of the fact that this white king is still in the middle of the board. So a couple of sample lines, like if white were to play something like hg6, just saying, I'm going to keep playing for mate, I don't care. Rook d4 is a problem. You're playing rook d4. They can't play queen d4 or bishop d4 without knight f3 check coming in, and that would win the queen. So they would actually have to move their queen away. The line given is queen g2, rook b4, takes on f7, takes on f7, g5, knight g4 is supposed to be an unclear position, but this position is supposed to be perfectly okay for black, and black is supposed to be doing just fine here. So this position is okay for black, good for black. We're going to go back, and we're going to play something else. h6, g6 doesn't seem to work. What if they just castle here? Castle's queenside is a definite possibility. If castle's queenside, you can simply play rook d4, and no matter what captures on the d4 square, whether it's the queen or whether it's the bishop, you would reply with knight takes f3, and black is doing just fine in that position. Those positions are also supposed to be unclear. You're down in exchange, but you have tons and tons of compensation for that exchange, so black is doing just fine. Those positions are just unclear. Black has compensation for the material after rook takes d4. Black is doing great. So rook c4, what do we do? Well, the computer has some weird recommendations. If you put this position in an engine, at first the computer will just say major advantage white. But if you run the lines that the computer recommends, the final result of this analysis is basically just that white has a space advantage, and the computer will give white a little bit of an edge because of that space advantage, but it'll reduce its advantage from major advantage to slight edge once you actually put in the top line into the engine. So for example, knight on c to e2, you would exchange queens. This is actually one of the recommendations. King takes queen, and then you would shuffle this rook back to c8. You haven't lost an exchange. White can gain space with 2 pawn pushes, h6 and then a4. And in this position, the computer gives slight edge white, but really the computer is just taking a look at the space. This position is approximately level. White has more space. Black has a better structure. Another way white can play this, and another kind of weird computer recommendation, is this kind of goofy move, castles kingside. And I say that it's goofy because this is a very non-human kind of way of playing. You castle on the same side that you just pushed all of your pawns, which seems really weird. So it makes perfect sense that we say, okay, we threatened to sack the exchange, let's just pull that rook back, and let's leave you with your king on the king side. And this actually happened in a game. This happened in Shermans versus Brunner in France in 2004. That game continued hg6, hg6, and then white continued g5, which is probably kind of a questionable move because after knight h5, black stops everything up. And then queen h2, which is also probably questionable because after knight c4, this position was actually major advantage black, and black was doing very, very well here, and black actually went on to win. So if we go back, we have kind of these goofy replies. After rook c4, we have castles kingside, we have knight on c to e2. And so the big question, the only question remaining is, well, what happens if they just take it? What happens if they take the exchange? And of course, we have to have a plan if they take it, right? That makes sense. So we're going to have bishop takes c4, we're going to have knight takes c4, and we're going to have a big kind of family fork here. We're going to be forking the queen, the bishop, and the pawn on b2. Now, why is this important? Why is this a big deal? Because after queen c1, defending the pawn on b2 and defending that bishop on e3, we're going to be taking the dark squared bishop. And this is an important positional concept in the dragon, but just in chess in general. After queen takes e3, all of white's pieces are on these dark squares. And all of white's pieces are relatively loose. The queen on e3 isn't anchored. Nothing is defended. A lot of these pieces are pinned. And we have this monster of a dark squared bishop on the g7 square. This should be a serious amount of compensation. And actually, if you put this in an engine, the engine doesn't even see the compensation immediately. It actually at first thinks that white is doing really, really great. But then after you play a few more moves, it starts realizing that these dark squares this is a problem, and black is actually doing really good here. So the move that black has to play is this move queen b6. And queen b6 is just this great move. It's hitting the knight on d4, it's taking advantage of this loose queen, it's taking advantage of this pin, and it's also hitting the pawn on b2. So queen b6 comes with this primary threat. We're threatening pawn to e5. So if we play any type of normal move here, like if we were to play something like castles queenside, we're going to run into e5. And now knight f5 would be completely forced because it's the only knight move that you can play that doesn't hang the queen. So you would play knight f5, g takes f5, and now black has 2 pieces for the rook, and black's position should be considered slightly better here. So this position is advantage black. So what's the alternative to castles queenside to hold the pawn? Well, obviously we could step out of the pin. So the alternative is queen to d2. Now this is kind of an interesting situation. We have loose everything in this position. The b2 pawn is loose, the g4 pawn can become loose, and of course the knight on d4 is loose. But we have to play the correct move. And the move that is the most direct, the most correct, and the move that wins the most material is this wonderful looking move, knight takes e4. So one of the ideas is that there's not really going to be an f takes e4 because after bishop takes d4, we're going to be threatening, bishop e3, bishop d2, and bishop takes g4. So we don't want to leave that pawn on g4 hanging, so knight to e4 is kind of a forced move, and then we're going to have bishop takes d4, and this leaves white with an incredibly awkward situation because he still can't castle with his king anywhere. If castles queenside, he would get mated. Queen takes b2 is mate. So b2 is threatened, the dark square diagonal is threatened, black has plenty of compensation for what material he's down, which at this point is very little since he just won that pawn on e4, and he's still basically dominating the dark squares, and he's got the bishop pair. Black is actually slightly better in this position. This position is slight edge black. So in conclusion, what we need to do if they decide to keep their king in the middle of the board is we need to play this sacrifice, we need to play this move rook to c4, and we need to set up this threat of rook takes d4, and we need to ask white what he's doing in this position. Why did you decide not to castle queenside? And we need to take advantage of the fact that this white king is still in the middle of the board with this very goofy looking sacrifice rook to c4. So anyways, I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you learned something new about chess, and I hope you can use some of these ideas in your own games. Thank you very much for watching.